welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Deandra Vaughn, and if you are not new here, then welcome back to the click. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys all about the National Counselor exam. I recently took and passed my NCE exam, and I just wanted to kind of give you guys my experience and also tell y'all how I studied and just some overall tips for the exam and kind of talk to you guys about what the exam actually entails. So to start off, the NCE, or the National Counselor Examination, is the exam that you have to take for licensure in most states. Some states require that you take a different exam, or maybe there's like a state-specific exam, but for most states, including the state that I live in, which is Alabama, the NCE is required to become licensed. Counselors who pass the exam and also meet all the other requirements for the National Board for Certified Counselors also are able to receive their NCC, which is National Counselor Certification, and that ultimately just means that you are able to say that I am a nationally certified counselor, and it's just something that you can hang on your walls so that your clients know that they're getting great care in your office. And all of this requires that you first pass your NCE exam. So it's a pretty big deal, but we're not gonna panic because all of you are gonna do great. So the format of the exam is 200 multiple choice questions, and you take the questions on the computer. Only 160 of the questions are actually scored. The other 40 are just questions that they're testing out for future exams. So basically, if you miss those, they don't impact your score at all. And because of that, the highest score that you can possibly make on the NCE is a 160. And another little tidbit, they give you 4 hours to complete all 200 questions, so you really don't have to worry that much about running out of time because they give you plenty of time to complete the exam. I think I finished in like less than half that time, so no worries there. So now we're going to talk about passing the exam. So they really don't give out a specific number that you have to get to pass the exam. And ultimately that's because there's a lot of different versions of the NCE. So the scores are different depending on which version you take. But from what I saw online, you basically need to get somewhere around 60 to 65% of the questions correct in order to pass. Because there are different versions of the test, it's possible to have 2 people get the exact same number of questions correct and 1 person pass and 1 person fail. It just depends on which version you actually have. However, the test is not scored on a curve. So in other words, your test is not impacted by who else takes the exam the same day or the same time as you. There is a specific cutoff score that determines whether or not you passed or not, regardless of who else took the test. So now I'm going to talk about which topics are covered on the exam. So the exam is based on the 8 CACREP core content areas. And if you don't know, CACREP stands for Counseling and Related Educational Programs. And for the most part, all 8 of these content areas were probably covered in your school curriculum while you were getting your master's degree. I know at GCU, which is where I'm graduating from, we literally had classes with the exact title as these 8 content areas. And they do it like that to ensure that you are learning everything that CACREP expects us to know for this exam. So the 8 topics are human growth and development, social and cultural diversity, helping relationships, group work, career development, assessment and testing, research and program evaluation, and lastly, professional orientation and ethical practice. So those are the 8 areas. The biggest section is the helping relationships, and the smallest section is the research and program evaluation. So if you're going to choose an area to focus on, definitely focus on the helping relationships section because there are a lot of questions from this section. Okay, so now we can finally get into why you probably clicked on this video, which is how I studied and how I passed the NCE exam on my first try. So if you are pursuing your counseling degree, you probably have not gotten this far without hearing about this book. So this is what everybody calls the purple book, and it is the Encyclopedia of Counseling by Howard Rosenthal. So this book says that it's a master review and tutorial for the National Counselor Exam, State Counseling Exam, and the Counselor Preparation Comprehensive Exam. So ultimately, regardless of which counseling exam you are taking, you should be using this book because a lot of the different exams cover the same material, and this is just basically like the Bible for counseling. That's pretty much what it's known for. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the purple book. So Rosenthal essentially divides this book into different chapters. The first couple of chapters are just kind of explaining to you about the exam, and he kind of gives you some study tips for how you can effectively study and pass the exam. But then once you get to chapter 3, that is when he starts getting into the actual core content areas, and each chapter focuses on a different core area. So for instance, chapter 3 is on human growth and development. And literally the entire book is just multiple choice questions. It is just front to back, questions after questions, and under each question it gives you the correct answer as well as a full explanation of why the correct answer is the correct answer, but also why the other answer choices were not the best answer. So I really loved that about this book because sometimes the incorrect answers are just as important as the correct answers, and you can still get points on your exam because he explains the wrong answers and what the question would be if that was to be the correct answer. So it's just a really, really great study tool. So the way that I used the purple book was I would just go down the questions, I would cover up the answer whatever I think is the right answer, circle it, move on to the next one, circle it, move on to the next one, circle it. And then I would go back and basically kind of like grade myself. And the questions that I got right, I'd be like, all right, got that right. And then I would still read the explanation even if I got it right, because again, even the wrong answers have important information, and Rosenthal would go through and explain those answers as well. So I never would skip the question just because I got it right. And if I got to a question that I got wrong, then I would go and put a question mark by that question. I would highlight the question, and then I would go through, read the explanation, and highlight anything that was important. And the great thing about Rosenthal is he kind of lets you know what you need to be highlighting and focusing on, because he would have certain little reminders and tips or just important concepts bolded in the explanations. And I would always make sure I read those and highlighted those because obviously it's important to know for the exam. So when I first got this book, I was like several months out from taking my exam, and I kind of just was skimming through it. I would go through some questions, answer them, but I didn't really have any specific goal or focus. I was just trying to get familiar with answering the questions. So that was probably about like 6 to 8 months out from the exam. Then once I got closer to maybe like 3 months out from the exam, I started to really focus and answer questions a little bit more regularly. And then once I got to like a month and a half out from the exam, that's when I really got serious and I made a whole study schedule. And I made the study schedule inside of Excel. And basically my goal was to complete all 1100 questions. Yes, this book has 1100 questions in it. And I knew it was like a big goal, but I just wanted to have as much experience as possible going into the exam, and I felt like the best way to do that was to try to get through every single question as well as every single explanation. So that was what I did. I'm not telling you that you have to do that, but it really did help me. So at about a month and a half out, I had only done 200 questions. So once I made my study schedule inside of Excel, I started with question 201, and then I just had every single day in each row, and I would have 30 questions per day. And when I did the math, doing 30 questions every day would make sure that I got through all 1100 questions, but also gave me some time at the end, maybe like 2 weeks or so, to go back and review everything. I didn't want to be finishing up the questions like the day before the exam. So again, my Excel sheet, every day 30 questions, and then I would have a column for whether or not I completed the questions. Then I would have another column with what my score was out of 30, and then the next section was just the percentage of that score. And then in my last column, I added the star section. And this section was basically questions that I felt like I was still kind of struggling in, or questions that I just really wanted to focus in on maybe like the last couple weeks before my exam. So by creating this study schedule, I was able to clearly see which areas I was really weak in because of the percentages. So if there was a day where my percentage was below 70 or below 80, I would always know like that's a section that I need to really be focusing in on. And because Rosenthal's chapters were divided by the content area, it made it really simple, because it's like, okay, if I'm missing a lot of questions out of the 400s, then that means I need to go back and focus on chapter 4, whatever the content area for chapter 4 is. So by organizing your questions this way, it really does let you see what it is that you need to be working on the most. So the only other tool that I used, y'all, was the Mometrix practice exam. So Mometrix is a site that focuses on test preparation for a wide array of different tests, including the NCE. And they actually have a whole online prep program that you can pay for, but I did not do that. All I did was just take their free practice exam. And the way that I used this practice exam was I basically made it a pre-test and a post-test. So about a few months out before I really started studying more seriously, I took the practice exam just to see what I would score, what my baseline was, what areas I was kind of weak in, and what areas I already had a lot of knowledge about. And then I would go through each question, just like with Rosenthal. They would give you an explanation. I would go through the explanation, and I used that as a study tool as well. And because it was also 200 questions, that was like an extra 200 questions that I got to practice with, and questions that could potentially show up on my real exam. So that was really helpful. And then I took the exact same practice test again about a week or so before my exam. And of course, I scored super high on it because I had already seen all the questions before. But I like to do that because it kind of gives you a little bit of a boost in confidence before you take the real thing. And it also just lets you know that you are retaining the information, and it lets you kind of see if there are any areas that you still are getting wrong, and you can just look at those real quick before your exam. And that was literally all I used, y'all. I mean, between Rosenthal and that Mometrix practice test, I felt really confident. I felt really prepared going into the exam. And of course, there were still some things on the exam that I had never really seen before. And those might have been questions that they were just testing out. I don't know. But hey, you're always gonna have that on any exam. But I still was able to pass. I got roughly 80% of the questions right on my actual exam, which was a passing score. So I took my exam on November 20th, and right after you finish your exam, they print out your unofficial score report right there in the testing center, or at least that's what they did for me. And your unofficial score report tells you whether or not you passed or failed, and it actually includes like all the different content areas, how many questions were in each area, how many questions you got right in each core area. And I think that's really helpful because if for any reason you don't pass the exam, you'll be able to look at your score report and see, okay, I need to work on this before I retake it. And again, this is the unofficial score report. You don't get your official score report until like 8 weeks, I think it said. So I have not gotten my official report yet, but I don't think that it usually differs much or at all from the unofficial report. So if your unofficial report says that you passed, you can feel pretty confident that you did in fact pass. So I think that's everything, y'all. I think I covered everything that I could think of. If you have any extra questions or just any other topics that you want me to talk about, please let me know down in the comments. I can make a separate video addressing those things. And if you found this video helpful, then please consider giving it a thumbs up, and also share it with your friends, share it with your family so that they can also pass their NCE exam as well. Good luck to everyone that's getting ready to take their exam. I know you're going to absolutely kill it, so don't even worry about it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.